Okay, good morning all. So today we're going to be talking about Obsidian and how Obsidian helps us with SaaS security. Okay, so basically if we look at the past year, obviously a lot more workplaces and organizations have gone over to SaaS, and mainly due to the pandemic. However, with digital transformation before that, organizations were actually moving over to these SaaS services. It's really easy to use Office 365 or Google G Suite or Books or Zoom, etc., rather than set it up within your enterprise. So a lot more organizations were actually migrating there anyway. Obviously, the past year, and people have actually sped up this migration and deployment. So basically, where we used to have issues around security and people were thinking, actually, do we actually want to migrate this to a SaaS service? Because the security around these services has actually matured. The shared responsibility model, everybody is aware of that. The SaaS providers secure the infrastructure, and it's down to the enterprise to just secure the actual users and that data within that SaaS environment. But in actually doing this, we need to start looking in trying to secure our actual applications. What we don't want to do, we don't want to actually disrupt these applications, because we went to these applications because they were really easy to deploy. We don't want to start putting clunky security around these applications. If we look at the security, it's really hard for security teams, especially with SaaS, because everything's continuously changing. How do we actually monitor what administrators we actually have in these external environments? How do we know what users are actually using these applications and what they're actually doing within these applications? If we look at the amount of data now, rather than being on-premise, is scattered across all of these SaaS environment. So how do we actually know what's out there? How do we know who's sharing what? Should actual data be shared? Is it confidential data? If we look at Zoom meetings and Teams, we're all now collaborating more than we ever have done in the past, again, mainly due to COVID. So how do we go about securing these files? How do we stop them being shared to public sites, etc.? We've also got to bear in mind that each SaaS service provides us with more alerts, more metrics. How do we know actually what alerts we should be looking at? The actual alert, is that something we should be jumping on and looking into, or is it just noise? Okay, and then if you look at each provider, we've got a different interface for each provider. What's also transpired over the course of the last year, we're actually switching on services really quickly, and with a SaaS service we can fire it up immediately. How do we go about ensuring that actually that application is secure and the security teams know about that application? Because again, it's going to be a new application that they've got to learn. So we've got these constantly changing challenges for the security teams. So Obsidian was born basically to overcome these challenges. And basically, we're a SaaS application for SaaS applications. So within Cyberseer, we actually use Obsidian to protect these SaaS applications and give us a visibility of who's accessing the applications, what privilege levels we actually have within these applications, and what's actually going on with these. So we can actually secure all of your SaaS applications quickly by using Obsidian. We can actually get up and running within minutes. All we have to do is set up a tenant within Obsidian, and Obsidian is basically running within AWS. We set up a tenant, and then we use connectors to actually connect via APIs to pull information out of all these SaaS services. At the moment, we can scale in excess. We've got 600,000 user accounts in the largest deployments, but we've got unlimited scale. It's self-provisioning. So if you actually add more users, Obsidian can scale to that. If you add more applications, again, Obsidian can scale to that. So there is no hard limit. We can just scale out as required, because obviously we're a SaaS service too. So basically how it works, so Obsidian have written hundreds of APIs, and basically they're going out and connecting to all of the SaaS applications, and basically we've got the API then that we then pull in that data. Okay, and we then aggregate that data and we normalize that data, and then we start to enrich that data. And as I mentioned before, the three things we want to do: we want to know who's accessing the applications, what privilege levels users are connecting to, and basically what is the activity. And so what we're going to do, we're going to enrich that data, and by enriching that data, we're looking at source IP addresses, and we're actually looking at the location of that source IP address. Okay, we can then detect impossible travel with that. We can then detect whether credentials are being compromised, and through all that, we then create alerts. So the alerts you will see shortly when we go through the demo actually show up in the GUI, but we can actually send those alerts to the likes of ServiceNow or email, or we can send that within Cyberseer. We take that into Aspect, and then we actually look at those alerts and triage those alerts to see exactly what we need to be reacting on and actually stopping. We're also taking IOC from past attacks, and we're putting all this into the analytics. So if you look at the actual capabilities of Obsidian, we're actually giving you visibility of your entire SaaS environment across Zoom, across Office 365, G Suite, etc. And what we're doing is we're actually looking at which users are actually accessing these services. What roles do they have? How many privileged users do we have out there? Are those privileged users actually using those accounts? So we've got the visibility and the monitoring. We've then got cloud breach detection. So basically, we're an EDR for cloud. So we're looking at detecting compromises. Okay, we can see particular users accessing particular applications. We can see that a particular user is actually downloading a lot more files than they normally do, or they're accessing from a particular part of the world that they don't normally access. So again, we can look at compromised credentials. Again, going to insider threat as well, we can look at what the commonality across all users are, and we can then map that out and see actually a particular user might be going above the baseline for the entire organization. Again, that will flag up as suspicious activity. And we can look for particular threats as well. So we're taking those IOCs, and through Obsidian query language, we can actually query across our entire environment. Then data protection, we're also looking at what files are shared externally. Are people accessing that content anonymously? Meeting recordings, again, Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, these meetings are being recorded. Are they then being shared externally? And then finally, we have posture management. So we're looking at the actual account hygiene, the configuration, compliancy. If you look at SaaS applications, they can quickly and easily be up and running within minutes. That initial user may not have configured the actual application properly. They may have left open S3 buckets, which is still a common attack vector. So how do we go about making sure the posture of that SaaS service is secure and compliant to our organization? Okay, so with that, I will do a demo of Obsidian. So bear with me while I just bring up the GUI. Okay, so like I mentioned before, Obsidian is a SaaS service. Okay, and basically you log in through multi-factor authentication, and this is the initial landing page. So here on the left-hand side, we can see what actual alerts we need to be reacting to and acting on. So on the left side, you've got high alerts. These alerts here, they can be emailed to you, they can be sent to another system for you to then basically log tickets against that and then act upon that. Okay. If we look at the improve log, so this is basically looking at the configuration of your entire SaaS estate, and it's giving you recommendations. So here we can see that we've got basic authentication configured, may want to disable that. And then underneath here, we can actually see all the services that we have configured, and we can actually look at how many accounts are being used, how many are inactive, how many are active, the privileged accounts, how many we have, how many are used, etc. And then we've got our critical alerts and high alerts for each of these services. Okay. So if we actually look at how we go about configuring this, if we go to connections, these are the actual SaaS services that we support. And basically, we end up connecting to our SaaS application. So if we take AWS, for example, I can't configure this because it's in a read-only view, but if we wanted to connect to, let's take Office 365. Everybody's got Office 365. If we hit Office 365, we then create a connection. And this is going to ask us for our username and password. So we will enter the username and password, and that will then create a connection to our Office 365 tenant. If we've got multiple tenants, we can configure these as all new connections. What it's going to do is it's going to open up an API to Office 365, and it's going to pull down all that log data. So unlike a device which has got to learn, from day one, we've actually got 30 to 90 days worth of data, and it's going to pull all that log data in from Office 365. We're then going to do the data science and machine learning, the AI, and then start to populate Obsidian. So from day one, you've actually got value there. You've not got to put it in learning mode for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or 2 months. It learns from day one. Obviously, the longer you go back, if you go back 90 days, you might have gigs of data to pull in. If we then wanted to add another connection, we'd just go to the likes of Dropbox and add another connection. So it's really simple. So it's completely transparent to the user. We're not actually being a bump in the road. We're on the side, we're just doing API calls to those services and then populating the data. Okay, so there's no performance issues and bottlenecks, and there's no user interruption there. So basically, once we've created our connectors, the whole Obsidian service is then up and running. Okay, so we'll then be able to see. So let's go to the dashboard. So the summary report is where most people are going to be working. Okay. It's going to show you the successful logins, accounts with new alerts, and privileged logins, where users are logging in from, people with failed logins, locations, okay, whether accounts have been created recently, people sharing actual files, whether we've had any activity within the last 30 days, and all the actual privileged user roles across all of your environments. And so if we see that a privileged user isn't actually logging into that account, well, we may want to disable that, because again, there is a risk there that that privileged user could become compromised. Account risk, so if we click on this, we can see which accounts are generating the most alerts. We can scroll all the way down to the bottom of here. We can see where users are logging in. Again, we've got that GeoIP database built in, where users are logging in. And basically, what we can do is, I mentioned the connector before, and we're doing API calls. With some of these SaaS services, we can actually, in the majority of cases, we do read only, so we're just pulling the data down, but we can actually do read write. If we saw that actually we think an account has been compromised, we can actually do a write to disable that account within Office 365. So again, if we look at this tab, so privilege risk, we can see which accounts are privileged and all the actual services that we've got through the system, yeah, and where these last logins were. Okay. All of the role assignments, and this is across all of your SaaS services, not just one. Here we have our actual SaaS services that we've connected. So we go to Google. We've got a specific dashboard for Google. Again, we can see our active and inactive accounts, privileged accounts. We can see how many are being used. So if you've got a licensing and it's based on concurrent users and maximum users, actually we can start saving on our licensing costs, because 40% of our workforce don't actually log in. Okay, and so we've got use cases out there where we've actually saved organizations money, because we've now reduced the amount of licenses they're consuming. Okay. If we go to the likes of alerts, we're actually getting alerts, and basically these alerts come from the Obsidian intelligence catalog. So this is updated several times a month. And basically, we've got the actual name, the action description, and what services it's applicable to. And we can fine-tune the severity and decide whether to enable them or disable them. Okay. So if we then go back to our alerts, so as soon as we start hitting matching on those, the intelligence catalog, we then start firing up alerts. So for example, using a tool, okay, again, that's going to be flagged up with a high severity alert. And what we can do, we can actually use Obsidian query language to actually search through and start threat hunting across all these alerts. If we then drill down into activity, we can see what activity has been. Okay, so what I've got here, I've got a filter. And basically we can start mapping onto, right, we'll do a search for privileged users or non-privileged users. Yeah. And we might just want to select a duo, for example. Yeah. Or we might start saying, right, okay, let's do it against a MITRE ATT&CK framework. So there are a lot of different searches that we can do with an Obsidian. So moving on to usage. So this is showing us how many active accounts we've got, how many inactive accounts, the total amount of accounts. So this is where we can save money on your licensing. If you've gone out and bought 1,000 user license and you're using 100 of them, again, that's a cost saving to yourselves. And then finally, we have all of the users across all of those SaaS services, so we can see who's configured, who's actually accessing what, when they last accessed it, where they accessed it from, whether they're a privileged user. We can put watch lists around employees who are departing the company to see actually what they're doing. So if Joe was leaving, and we could then put a watch list on him to actually see what exactly he was doing within your cloud environment. So basically, that's the demonstration. So obviously, it is a really powerful tool, and it's giving you visibility across your SaaS services where normally you don't have visibility, and it's basically bringing everything into a single pane of glass. So let me go back to the presentation. So really, in conclusion, Obsidian is solving the challenges that are facing your security teams because it's easy to deploy, and then all of a sudden those security teams will understand which users are accessing those systems, which privileged accounts are accessing those systems, what files you've actually got, what users are sharing. And basically what is the activity across all of those accounts. We can identify the threats really quickly. In that left-hand alert pane, you will get those alerts immediately as soon as the threat's detected. Obviously, you don't want to be looking at this 24/7. So again, we can pipe that out via our API into SOAR platforms, into Cyberseer aspects, and do all that triaging and mitigating those threats from there. We're providing best practice recommendations through the hygiene. We can actually see that these services could be more finely tuned, so we can actually give you recommendations for that. Like I said, we've now got visibility of users and admins and seeing what they're doing, whereas before we didn't. Okay, and finally, it's really easy to deploy. It's really easy to integrate. It's a matter of having a tenant, configuring your connectors via those APIs, which will then go and pull all of your historic data down. So immediately you're up and running, and you can see what's going in going across your SaaS environment. So from day one, you can be reacting to those alerts and then fine-tuning your SaaS services to implement MFA or other security implementations. Okay, so thank you for your time today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them now. Obviously, if you want more information, because this was only a very short demo with the functionality of what Obsidian can do and what Cyberseer can do for you, please either contact myself or email info@cyberseer.net, and we'll be in touch. So thank you very much for your time. I'll just go to the lines now to see if there are any questions. Okay, so I've had one question about proof of concepts and putting this into your environment, and how long does that take? So really, as I mentioned before, all we need to do is we can fire up a demo tenant, and we just configure the connectors to pull that data from your cloud environments. Okay, and this is non-intrusive, it's really easy to do, and we can have all that data up and running within about 5 or 10 minutes. Okay. I've not got any more questions, so if you do think of any more questions, please send an email to info@cyberseer.net, and we'll be in contact. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you found that useful. Thank you.